Hello and welcome. Good evening. Welcome to tonight's Boston 2024 Citizens Advisory Group meeting. We're thrilled to be here at UMass Dartmouth. Thank you very much to our partners here for their hospitality and for hosting us this evening. My name is Nico Mendoza. I'm the Vice President for Engagement Strategy and External Affairs at Boston 2024, and I'm very excited to see you all here tonight. You are quiet for now, but I know you'll get much more engaged as we get to questions and discussion later on. I'd also like to welcome our audience watching tonight on live stream, thanks to our partnership with WCVB Channel 5. So hello to all of you watching from the comforts of your living rooms and couches. I see a few familiar faces here from other meetings that we've had before, and some new faces as well. Whether this is your 5th meeting or your first, we appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedules to join us for this important conversation. We want to hear your input, your ideas, your feedback, your questions, your concerns. And we will continue to solicit all of this feedback as we continue with these community meetings, 20 statewide community meetings over the next 20 weeks. Our bid will be stronger thanks to your active engagement, so thanks again for taking the time to be here. This is our 3rd Citizens Advisory Group meeting. During our first 2 meetings, you shared creative ideas and insightful feedback. Last month's meeting elicited 35 questions that helped continue to inform our materials, our messaging, our process overall. So again, thank you for your comments. The key themes from those questions are similar to what we've heard at other meetings: venue planning, economic impact, budget and responsible delivery of the games, and diversity and inclusion. We'll touch on these important issues again tonight and share some additional updates with you that have been going on at 2024 over the past few days. And in future meetings, we will continue to respond to your questions and the comments that are raised here tonight. As I mentioned, in addition to these CAG meetings, as we call them, we've launched 20 statewide community meetings over the next 20 weeks. Earlier this month, we were up in Lowell and in Cambridge, and in the next couple of weeks, we'll be in Springfield and Malden. Stay tuned for additional meetings coming to a region near you. We've also engaged a fabulous core of volunteers throughout this effort all across the Commonwealth. In fact, just yesterday, we recruited our 1,000th volunteer, so we're very excited about that, and we hope that all of you will get involved in one way or another as well. As I said tonight, we want to hear from all of you. We have a brief presentation from our team here, and we'll certainly leave plenty of time for questions and discussion later on. First of all, you've all received a green card. That's for opportunities to get further involved with our bid. We hope you'll take a moment to fill it out if you're interested, and members of our team will collect those from you later on. You see there are microphones here set up. Once we get into the Q&A, we'll ask folks to line up at their microphone and share their comments and questions at that point. Well, with that housekeeping completed, I want to get started and introduce our presenters tonight, starting with Rich Davey, CEO of Boston 2024. Rich's track record of leading organizations that are critical to the people of Massachusetts and doing so in an open, honest, and transparent manner is unrivaled, most recently as the head of the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. I had the privilege of working with him in our former tenures in state government, and I'm really thrilled to be working with him again in this capacity. Down at the end, Joe Lamar, a homegrown 2-time Paralympian and 2-time medalist, and I think he's brought some of that hardware with him as well. I'm sure he'll be excited to share that with you shortly. Joe competed in Barcelona in '92 and Sydney in 2000. I'm sure he would have loved to compete in his home country as well, but this is another great opportunity to let Joe talk about his experience. Right now, he's the head cross-country and indoor track and field coach, indoor and outdoor track coach at Durfee High School right in Fall River. He's one of the fearless leaders of our Olympic and Paralympic Movement Committee, and we're really excited that he's here tonight and involved with this effort. And in the middle, we have David Manfredi, founding principal of Elkis Manfredi Architects, and our chief architect at Boston 2024. He's a renowned champion of the protection of urban spaces in Boston and throughout the world, and everything he designs is through the lens of sustainability and environmental preservation. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to our CEO, Rich Davey.
Thank you, Nico. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me back to Dartmouth. I think the last time, rarely do people welcome me back. I always had bad news to share, but I think tonight, both as Transportation Secretary and as T General Manager, but tonight I actually have some we think, some very good news to share, and we hope that we can impart some information for folks here in the audience and at home, and take your questions, your suggestions, your honest feedback. This is a very iterative and public process. We have 9.5 years left before the Olympics would come to Massachusetts in 2024. In some respects, a long time, and in some respects, not such a long time. So we are out getting across Massachusetts, wanting to listen to folks, to incorporate your suggestions and ideas on how to make our bid better. And we sincerely want to hear that tonight, because we are taking back to our planning team and to our other teams, thinking about how we can make the games here in Massachusetts better for our state. And it's in that spirit that we're here tonight. You know, John Fish, our bid chairman, the host of folks who have been working on this bid the last 16 months, did not get into this without the feeling that this project, that bringing the Olympics and Paralympics to Massachusetts, could be good for our city and our state. There are dozens of elected officials, business leaders, philanthropists, community activists who see this as an opportunity to do what? Not only bring the games here in 9 years for that 4-week period, but to have a conversation about where we want to be as a state in 2024 and 2030 and beyond. What kind of investments do we want to see in our state? What do we want to showcase to the world about Massachusetts? You know, some folks have said, well, we're a world-class city already. We don't need the Olympics to be a world-class region. Well, that's exactly what world-class regions, in my mind, do. We raise our hands to the world and say, welcoming you to our shores, welcoming you to our state is what world-class states do. And that's why we're under this endeavor. You know, there are other tangible benefits that we see for Massachusetts, whether it's job creation. You know, independent report was released by the Boston Foundation last week, which talked about the tens of thousands of jobs, both before, during, and after the Olympic Games that would be created. Tourism coming. This is a great tourism state today. But when London hosted the 2012 Games, after those games, they became the most visited city in the world. They beat Paris for the first time in 500 years or something. They know the exact time frame. Why can't we dream? Why can't we dream for those kinds of things for our city and our state? So that's why we're here tonight. I think to really to be bold, to be visionary, and to see where we can be in 2024 and 2030 and beyond. Now, we have a lot of details to go through. Our slide presentation is representative of a lot of the questions that we've heard during our public process. Some are overarching. We will certainly get into, I know, topics very specific to both New Bedford, Fall River, and other parts here on the South Coast, which we welcome. We want to hear that. But our presentation will be a broad overview. Two of the things I want to mention. First is, I hope many of you received a packet of information which talked about our 10 principles. We put out yesterday in major periodicals around Boston in particular what we believe are the principles that will allow this bid to go forward: job creation, better housing, other opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses in the state, and achieving a majority of residents of Massachusetts support. And so this morning we announced that we are fully behind and will be proposing a ballot question for the citizens of Massachusetts to vote on in November of 2016. It's one thing that we've heard from our public meetings is that citizens wanted an opportunity to definitively weigh in, and we agree. If we don't receive a majority of citizens' approval in November of 2016, we will not submit a bid, period. We have to feel like this is good for our state, period. And if we don't, we have no business bidding. With that said, I am completely confident that through sessions like this and getting our message out and talking to folks about why we believe this can be good for Massachusetts and why we believe we can handle transportation and security concerns and why we believe that this will be a privately funded, no taxpayer dollar games, that we can convince a majority of Massachusetts citizens to be with us, to stand with us, and to say to the world, come and experience Massachusetts in 2024. So with that said, I don't have hardware, Joe. Some would say I'm hard-nosed, or I have a hard hat, or I have a hard head, or I'm just hard, basically, generally, a hard guy to get to know or something. But Joe's got some hardware he wants to talk about. He competed on our behalf in 2 games in 1992 and in 2000. As mentioned, he is a homegrown kid who still is here serving his community. We are delighted that he is here to join us. We've asked Joe to say a few words about his experience, so please join me in welcoming Joe Lamar, Paralympian for Massachusetts.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to start off by saying I'm not going to go through my complete story. We'd be here for a while, but you can go and see on YouTube, see Joe run to get my complete story out there. To let you know, I'm a Brockton boy, still a Brockton boy. I'm from Brockton, City of Champions. That's what it was all about for me growing up. I was one that was a runner, ran all the time. I ended up, though, losing my foot during my senior year of high school. Literally 3 weeks after winning the indoor mile at New England's, I ended up having my foot amputated. I knew it was going to happen, knew it was coming the entire time, and it was something that was tough to get through and go through. After that, I didn't know sports were still an option for me. It was something that I had no idea that I could still get back into running or anything. And I found out about the Paralympics. I started looking into the Paralympics. I started looking at times that athletes were running in the Paralympics, and I said, wow. I said, what is going on here? I can still compete. Soon after that, I was back running, and then the next thing I know, I had my surgery April 4th, 1990. I was in the Paralympic Games in October of 1992. I ended up going over to Barcelona, Spain, and winning the 400-meter run in Barcelona, Spain. And one of my friends right there, Jim Kelly, who coaches with me at Durfee High School, has the gold medal. He's going to be walking around. Feel free to go touch it. I have 2 rules. Don't grab it by the ribbon, hold it by the medal only, and make sure I get it back. But going and sharing with you guys what the experience was like and what it was all about, you know, Nico said, I wish I was able to compete at home in '96. I had the unfortunate, it was unfortunate, I ended up breaking my ankle a few months before the trials in '96. But it's something that stuck with me, and it's the only thing that kept me going for an additional 4 years to go and set goals to go after competing in Sydney in 2000. And in Sydney in 2000, my bronze medal is over there. I don't really go and pass that one around. The gold one's the one that counts. But what was it all about? What was it like? It's unbelievable. You know, to go and think about 2024 and having people here in the U.S. be able to compete, it's something that, again, I wish I had the opportunity, and I hope that Boston will be accepting of 2024 and let the games come here. You know, show what Boston's all about, because we are champions. We've seen it over the years. You know, not just our sports, but everything that we do. Look at the education. You know, look at the colleges that we have. Everything that we do, we are champions. Why not let the world hear and show the world that we are champions? Thank you. I'll be around.
You said you wanted the gold back. What about the bronze? I mean, I could take that too.
No one hurt.
Thank you very much, Joe. Joe obviously spoke passionately about the power of sport. I'm going to talk about the power of planning. And what we have done to date, we have called proof of concept. And the plan that you have seen on our website or that you've seen in the newspapers represents the plan that was developed for our submission in December of 14. It's the plan that got us to where we are today, which is as the designee for the United States. But it is a plan that will undoubtedly change. It is a first generation. We now have the advantage of having much more input from the USOC. We have the advantage of engagement with some of the national sports federations. But most importantly, we have the advantage of meetings with community groups, with neighborhood groups in the city of Boston, and we have communities coming to us and saying, have you looked at, have you thought about? And in some cases we have thought about, but in some cases we haven't. So there is clearly going to be change, there's going to be evolution of this plan. What will remain consistent is some very simple planning principles, which start with sustainability. And this really goes to the IOC's Agenda 2020. In December of this past year, the IOC issued something called Agenda 2020 about the future of the games. And it really goes to games of an appropriate scale and proportion, and it goes specifically to sustainability. And sustainability in its environmental context, but also in its social and fiscal context. And that, while venues will change, our commitment to that kind of sustainability will remain constant. We've talked a lot about walkability and transit-oriented games, and I think that's important. It's important because a lot of our venues, as you know, are located in the city of Boston. We want to make it convenient. We want to make the city part of the celebration. But I think we also want to put a little bit of twist on walkability and talk more about connectedness. And connectedness can reach outside the city and reach further to the Commonwealth and make connections to different places in the Commonwealth. We talk about legacy value for Boston and for the Commonwealth. And what we really mean by legacy is really very simple. That for the games having been here in 2024, how will the city be better? How will the Commonwealth be better? Because if it's not better, if we really haven't used the games as a catalyst for all sorts of infrastructure improvements, parks and recreation improvements, education improvements, then they really haven't achieved their goal. And lastly, leverage existing venues. This actually goes back to sustainability. We have the advantage of great colleges and universities, not only in Boston, but in the Commonwealth. And on the campuses of those universities, there's some fabulous facilities. We want to use them. We want to partner with those universities. We want to put the world's athletes on university campuses. After all, the Olympics are about youth, education, and sports, and there's a very natural connection there. And frankly, without the universities, without that connection, the games in Boston and the Commonwealth are really not possible. So we've called everything we've done to date proof of concept. And all we really mean is that we were trying to demonstrate that the region, that the city had the capacity to host the games. And I think we proved that. Now we've really got to refine that plan, and we've got to make that plan real. In fact, if you look at the history of planning for games venues from Moscow in 1980 to Tokyo in 2020, there's a lot of evolution in the plans. There's evolution from the original internal submission, meaning domestic submission in the countries that have them, to the official candidate city submission until the ultimate plan. Sometimes as much as 40% of the venues change. I think that's natural. It's 10 years away. Things change. New opportunities arise. Some opportunities fall away. The plan I'm not going to talk about in great detail tonight. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. What's on the screen there, maybe a little bit hard to read, is really the plan that's based in the city of Boston. It is made up of these two clusters, which we've called the waterfront cluster and the university cluster. Really key venues are the Olympic Village, which is on the waterfront related to UMass Boston, and the proposed 60,000-seat temporary Olympic Stadium, what we're calling Midtown, which is really rail yard, City of Boston maintenance facilities, and something called the New Boston Food Market. And then a series of venues that are in what we're calling the University Cluster, which is really the intersection of Boston University, Harvard, and MIT. We've talked in different places, but it's all available on the website, about venues that are outside of the city, venues that are in Lowell, for instance, on the Merrimack River. And we've looked at venues in the western part of the state for the whitewater events. And we continue to look at alternatives around the state to make all of those connections, and really to provide absolutely the best venues possible, on the one hand, to create the best athlete experience possible, to set world records in the Commonwealth, but secondly, wherever the location of venues can really provide legacy, can have a tangible and enduring legacy in that community, in that neighborhood, in that city, that is long-term and that somehow adds to quality of life. And so I will stop there, and as Nico said, we will leave lots of time for questions. And I will go back to Rich for all of the hard parts of this.
Before Rich continues, I just wanted to acknowledge New Bedford Mayor John Mitchell, who's joined us tonight. Thank you so much, Mayor, for being here.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So we'll go through just, again, some of the questions, the details that we've been requested to respond to as we've gone through the public meetings proactively. And then from there, I'll kick it back to Nico, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. On our games budget, we want to be clear. There are really three buckets of both expenses and revenues that we believe will allow us to privately finance this games, with the exception of security, which I'll start with. We're holding about $1 billion worth of a security budget, and we want to be crystal clear. We need the federal government's support and approval in order to pay for that security and in order for the games to happen. Since 9/11, large sporting events, including every Super Bowl, and the games actually around the world, have had some component of either United States military or significant security Secret Service. The games are no exception. And any city that won the designation, whether it was Boston or the cities we beat, San Francisco, Los Angeles, or Washington, D.C., would have needed this support. And folks, this is actually less about Boston and less about Massachusetts, but it's like a real question: does the United States want to host the Olympic Games ever again? And if we do, we need the federal government to provide that kind of security. With due respect to our local law enforcement, state police, and others, we do not have the expertise, intelligence, of national intelligence to be able to pull this off alone. So that is a requirement. We've been clear about that. It's one of our 10 principles. On the operating budget, about a $4.7 billion budget to actually operate the games. What does that mean? That means everything from temporary stands at locations, to feeding the athletes, to transportation, to buying our volunteers jackets. I see a couple of folks wearing Salt Lake City jackets in the audience. That is what the games operating budget would be. And that's paid for, privately funded, in a number of categories. TV rights, for example. So NBC has the TV rights with the International Olympic Committee through the 2032 games. Whoever wins the games will be entitled to a significant revenue share for all TV broadcast rights, about $1.2, $1.4 billion, which includes NBC. Ticket sales, corporate sponsorships are significant. I don't know if folks have been following the news, but Tokyo, which has the 2020 Summer Games, has been very aggressive in signing up local sponsorships. In Japan, we would do the same. More than half of all revenue generated for any games in the world comes from the United States. So we're very optimistic that we'll be able to continue to grow those revenues. And obviously ticket sales, as I mentioned. About $4.7 billion we're expecting to raise, merchandising and others, to pay for the games. On our non-operating budget, the so-called non-OCOG budget is really on three major facilities: the International Broadcast Center, the Olympic Village, where the athletes would stay, and the stadium itself, the Olympic Stadium, which, as David mentioned, is proposed to be in downtown Boston. For the Athlete Village and for the stadium, what we are proposing to do is enter into private-public partnerships with real estate developers who would develop the land as a legacy for the city of Boston. And so that the stadium itself would be temporary. We would literally lease the land or borrow it for a short period of time, while a development of mixed use, retail, low, middle, moderate, and market rate housing would be developed over probably a 2-decade period. And in the case of the Athletes Village, we're proposing to build it next to UMass Boston, which folks here may know has been traditionally a commuter school in Boston, but is transitioning to a mix of both residential and commuter. And they don't have adequate housing today. So part of our plan would be to work with UMass, build the Athlete Village, and then have a developer lease back to UMass some small subset, not the entire village, for UMass students going forward in Boston. And then the remainder could be a number of things: affordable housing, mixed-use housing. We've looked at modular housing, where we actually could take part of the housing down and build it in other parts of both Boston and the region that might have need for affordable or workforce housing. A number of concepts that we're considering. But again, we're very confident that we'll be able to do that privately financed. Yep. Transportation plans, something near and dear to my heart. You know, a number of folks have said, well, what do you need to pull the games off? What do you need to ensure that transportation is appropriate for 2024? Well, I first stop people and say, we need to realize why we were selected over LA, over San Francisco, and over Washington, D.C. It's because we've already made investments in ourselves here in Massachusetts over the last couple of decades, from the cleanup of the Boston Harbor to the expansion of Logan Airport to a number of our highway networks, including the Central Artery Tunnel Project. If we didn't do those things, the United States Olympic Committee would have never selected us. And so that's the backbone of our bid. There are other projects that we all know are in queue already, upgrading the subway system in Boston in particular, which had some challenges this winter, no doubt, in the red and orange line. And then other projects that we believe could help the Olympics, particularly depending on where our venues are. And so London in particular, which hosted the 2012 Games, Londoners and the British government used the Olympics as a catalyst for more investment that wasn't planned, something that we would welcome in all parts of the state, something that's not technically required to run the games, but something that we would welcome. If citizens, if the legislature, if political leaders can use this moment to say, let us invest further in our transportation network across the state, we would applaud that. How do we make sure that we're on time, we're on budget? Another question that has come up. Well, a few things that we've both done in the public sector in my career and in the private sector, a number of folks on our committee have done as well. The first is good planning up front. You know, David and our team have spent a lot of time and are going to continue to spend a lot of time out in the public, listening to folks and talking, and then really nailing down our venues. You know, one challenge that London had, for example, was they proposed a temporary stadium, budgeted a certain amount of money, began construction, and then decided to make it a permanent stadium, which increased the cost dramatically. Knowing what we're going to build up front, making those decisions appropriately now, and sticking to those decisions will allow us to keep our budget in good shape. You know, disciplined and innovative project and oversight, something that we have done pretty well recently in Massachusetts. So whether it's penalties or incentives for contractors, something we used very successfully in some major infrastructure projects in Boston and around the state to make sure that projects were on time and on budget. There's nothing like a carrot and a stick on a table with a contractor. Olympic Agenda 2020, something that we feel very good about. It was an articulation of principles that the International Olympic Committee put out in December, which said that they want sustainable games. They want legacy games. They no longer want cities to be building large, very expensive projects that have no use beyond. And our proposal, I think as previously mentioned, relies heavily on existing venues. TD Garden, the Songus Arena in Lowell, Agganis Arena at Boston University, and other college and university facilities in and around the city. And we are now taking input from other folks who have ideas on great venues that are great for the athletes, can be great for the spectators, but that are low cost. So where we can use existing facilities and our own natural resources around Massachusetts, we're taking a hard look at that because we believe it meets the Agenda 2020, the Vision 2020 of the Olympics, of the International Olympic Committee, excuse me. And then finally, insurance, something that Chicago, while it did not win the 2016 games, brought to the table as a very innovative way to de-risk, to reduce the risk as much as possible on all folks. And we believe a sophisticated package of insurance that we can purchase or that developers can purchase can help de-risk and make sure that these are not, again, taxpayer dollars that are being spent, and the projects will be delivered by the games. Some have said the games are a money loser. Folks, to be clear, no one has controverted this evidence. The last 3 games in the United States have turned a net cash positive. They made a profit, simply put, uncontroverted. Los Angeles in 1984 was able to net a profit of $250 million. And what did they do with that? They created a foundation which 31 years later, today, is still giving out grants to youth programs, youth sports programs in Los Angeles. Salt Lake City actually turned a profit of $100 million, turned $50 million back to both the city of Salt Lake City and the state of Utah, and then left another $56 million available to fund the infrastructure upgrades that would be necessary for the venues they built, so that the luge and the bobsled and other venues that were built would not sit fallow and fall apart, and the public have to pay for that. They left behind a capital program that they could reinvest into those venues. And as mentioned, Atlanta turned a very small profit of about $10 million in 1996. What are the economic benefits writ large? As I mentioned, the Boston Foundation came out with an independent report just last week, which talked about the short-term economic impact for Boston and Massachusetts. Tens of thousands of construction jobs, temporary and permanent jobs that would be created, and an infusion of billions of dollars into our economy that won't be spent here. They'll be spent somewhere else if we lose, Rome or Paris or Hamburg. This is, again, uncontroverted, what has happened. This is our impact, Boston's impact. So 24,000 jobs, 50,000 games jobs, and tourism. I think has been previously mentioned that London experienced the highest tourism ever a year after the games. They beat Paris for the first time in a long time as the most visited city in the world. That's what we're talking about. What can we do as a short-term and a long-term economic impact for Massachusetts? In terms of opportunities for the South Coast, there are a number. Training camps, preliminary and test events, the Cultural Olympiad, something that each host city has been a sponsor of the last few years, the last few games, I should say, where the host city holds a whole number of cultural and arts events over 2 to 3 or 4 year period leading up to the games. London most recently did it in 2012. From 2009 through 2012, held a number, about 500 events all across Britain in advance of the games. Youth programs, tourism, and hospitality. And I'll be candid, because I know I'm going to hear it tonight, which is good. We've had conversations and we've heard some pitches, both publicly and privately, from Mayor Mitchell and from New Bedford about considering siting sailing here in New Bedford, something that we're open to, and I know we'll hear more about tonight. And our friends from Fall River have also made a pitch for potential use of South Watapa Pond for rowing, something else that we're giving consideration to. So, you know, we've definitely told many parts of the state that even if you don't get a venue, there is significant ways to participate. Although, again, I know we'll hear some ideas about venues tonight, which is good. There are other ways to get involved across Massachusetts, and we're very, very open to that. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Nico to moderate the Q&A. But again, we very much appreciate your attention. We appreciate your attention at home. You know, this is a 2.5-year process. We have a ballot question in 19 months, 20 months from now. We want to hear from you. We want to understand your critique, your feedback, how we can make this bid better. Because at the end of the day, this is going to be Massachusetts' bid. We want a majority of citizens to be behind us, to feel as though this is part of their legacy for our state and something that is good for all of us. So again, we really appreciate your attention. I'll turn it back over to Nico.
Thank you very much, Rich. And with that, let's turn it over to your questions and comments. And as I mentioned before, we have these 2 microphones here. If folks could just line up at the microphones. And we do want to hear from as many people as possible, so we just ask that you keep your comments and questions relatively brief so that we can give everybody an opportunity to chat. Mayor, you're up. Thank you for being here.
I am, and I adjusted the microphone, Nico. Thank you. And thank you, Rich, and thank you for bringing the team down and making a presentation to us down here in Greater New Bedford. We're excited about the prospect of the Olympics in our capital city of Boston. And Boston really has emerged as a world-class city, and it would be fitting of a world-class city like Boston to host an Olympic Games, the Summer Olympic Games. Boston has emerged over the last few decades as a regional center and really is an international city now. And I heard recently a joke that the official bird of Boston is a crane now. If anybody who's driven in the Seaport District in the last couple of years will know exactly why. The place is booming, it is cosmopolitan, it's hip, it's happening all the time. New Bedford is not part of Greater Boston. We're some 60 miles away, but we believe very firmly that we can play a very productive part in this effort. Above all, we have the perfect venue already built for an event that is near and dear to our hearts here, and that venue is Buzzards Bay. And,
How much did that cost?
It hasn't cost us a penny. And that event is the sailing event. New Bedford is nothing if not a port city. We were the center of the world's whaling industry in the 19th century. At one point, the wealthiest city per capita in the United States. As a result, we are today the preeminent commercial fishing port in the United States. Some 34% of all the fish landed in New England come through the port of New Bedford, 9% of the entire country. We are a very busy, one of the busiest commercial ports in America, but we're also a great recreational port. Yachting Magazine 2 years ago named New Bedford one of the 50 top recreational boating destinations in the United States, and it's because the city's right on top of the water. It's a great place. It's a place where the city itself, the community itself, is integrated into its port and vice versa. So we think there's a compelling case, and Rich noted some of the private discussions we've had, but we've had some public comments as well about why, on the merits, New Bedford is frankly not only the best place for the sailing event to be held for these games, but may well be the best place in America to hold a sailing event. And it's for this reason, principally because Buzzards Bay is such a fantastic place to sail. It is reliably windy, not too windy. It's sort of the Goldilocks venue. The wind is just right, and it's reliable. And we have hosted, Buzzards Bay has one of the premier boating races in the United States, the largest, the Buzzards Bay regatta for so many years now that we have a boating community here that extends all throughout Greater New Bedford, that is comprised of folks who know what they're doing out in the water, can tell you, and there are many here that I'll introduce in a second, who are part of our committee, who are both high-level practitioners, but also have a certain passion for New Bedford and understand the benefit that would come as a result. They can speak to that better than I. New Bedford doesn't have the complications that Boston has. Candidly, we don't have Logan Airport flight paths in the way of NBC helicopters, potentially, so that's not an issue at all. Although our regional airport, the New Bedford Municipal Airport, can serve as a transportation node for these games. It's easy to get helicopters off the ground from the north end of New Bedford to deploy out to the race site to cover the site for the network. That's easy. It's one of the primary attractions is where the games would be viewed from land. In the southernmost tip of New Bedford sits Fort Tabor Park, which is a 47-acre park owned by the city of New Bedford, all city-controlled land, that has a Civil War era fort designed by none other than Robert E. Lee prior to the Civil War when he was on the good side. That has in front of it in the foreground a 10-acre lawn that could be readily filled with temporary stands for easy viewing of the race events. Indeed, the Buzzards Bay Regatta holds many of, and again, this group can tell you this in some detail, holds its races within a short viewing distance of that site. You will have stands almost right on top of the sailing races, which is really unusual. New Bedford is a place that will embrace these games. We don't have the hang-ups that I think some folks in Boston do. The more the better, and I was telling Rich earlier, if you have some orphan events that are just looking for a place, that we'd be happy to take them in as well. But sailing is it here, and there's a certain passion around the water here that makes it a great community to host something like this. We would embrace the idea of the training rounds in the years ahead that would lead up to it. And the other thing that, on the issue of sustainability, we're a city, as much as we are a maritime city, we have been an industrial city for most of our history. And like other older industrial cities in the Northeast, we suffer from the ills of higher unemployment and a declining tax base. And these are things that we struggle with all the time. The kind of economic infusion that would come with the hosting of the sailing events in New Bedford would be good for the community, would be a shot in the arm, but because the sailing event is really sort of a multi-year event with train-ups along the way, it would be a sustained infusion of capital into the city. And the other thing I'd say is this, and this again goes to the point about our being an older industrial city. We look for opportunities, we look for antidotes to the older industrial stigma. We're one of the greenest cities in America. We're a national leader in solar. We're on the cusp of becoming a leader in offshore wind. The rebranding of New Bedford is taking place right now, and having the sailing event in New Bedford would go a long way to further those efforts. There's a lot of good to be had as a result of this. As part of our efforts, we put together I put together a committee of folks who individually and collectively have forgotten more about sailing than I will ever know. Some of them are here tonight. I just asked them to come up and just say a few quick words, but just by way of introduction, Andy Hurley is the director of the Community Boating Center in New Bedford, whose mission is to bring sailing to inner city kids, to give them an opportunity to get a feel for the joy of sailing, but also the edifying benefits of sailing as well. Andy is an Olympic trialist. 2000? Which was 2000. It was 2000. So he's lived the Olympic experience as well and can speak directly to that. And he's a really good sailor. On top of it, Dan Cooney is the incoming Commodore of the Beverly Yacht Club in Marion, who himself is an accomplished sailor and competitive sailor for many years and really understands and knows very well the interplay between the sailing pavilion and the host city. He can speak directly. He's very familiar with Weymouth and Qingdao and other places that have hosted sailing events, and how New Bedford compares to those places. I will just preview his comments and say he thinks that we do better than those places. Joe Nauman is the Commodore of the New Bedford Yacht Club. Joe is the General Counsel and Senior Vice President of the Acushnet Company, the makers of the finest golf balls in the world, right here in New Bedford. And he can also speak to the hospitality, the appeal and the suitability of New Bedford as a site for the sailing event. Mary Ellen DeFrias is the director of the Buzzards Bay Regatta, again one of the premier yachting events in America. And Lobo is the director of the Low Tide Yacht Club right in New Bedford. That's situated right at Fort Tabor Park in the South End, where if New Bedford were to host this event, inevitably a great deal of activity would occur. And then there's Ray Cullum, who is the former Commodore at the Beverly Yacht Club and can speak to many of these issues. I would invite them to come up, and I don't know if all of them want to come. It may not be appropriate, but it may be. I would just ask Andy in particular, but others as well, if you want to add on to Andy's comments, just to speak to the sailing event and how it would work in New Bedford.
Thank you, Mayor, for your comments and your enthusiasm. It's very helpful to get this kind of feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having us. Very excited about the opportunity about the Olympics in Boston, and also potentially thinking about New Bedford. So as John said, I did an Olympic campaign for the Sydney 2000 Olympics. So that was a 4-year endeavor of training events. We basically did a lot of fundraising ourselves, but you basically go where all the sailing venues are and where the sailing, where the good sailing is. So we sailed all over Europe, Australia, all across the United States, and I would definitely really like to say that Buzzards Bay Regatta is probably one of the best sailing venues. I am biased growing up here, and I do cruise here every single weekend, but for the warm water, the consistent sea breeze, again, not too strong, but just right. The currents aren't too strong, just very great sailing situation. On the other hand, I'm now the executive director of the Community Boating Center, where our mission is to teach positive life values to youth through boating. So we use the marine environment and we embrace it to give kids and their families, particularly in New Bedford with our strong maritime heritage, opportunities to learn from the marine environment. And I can tell you how strong of a situation it is. We're at Denison Memorial Community Center earlier today, and we have 20 kids building a 12-foot rowboat. And these kids have never been in the water before, on the water, but here they are constructing their own boat. And then when it gets a little warmer, we're a little late this year with the weather, but they'll be out on the water in their own boat for the first time, taking their first steps in the water, because the marine environment and boating is really an ultimate equalizer. When you get people on boats, it just opens them up. And the legacy that this could have with New Bedford of building the infrastructure. We're a small organization, we do just a little bit work now, but to see what this could do for a long-lasting impact for the entire community would be unbelievable in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm just going to take this gentleman here. He's been very patient, so I'm going to ask him to ask his question or share his comment, and then we'll come back to this side.
Thank you very much. My name is Chris Larkosh. I'm a professor of Portuguese here at UMass Dartmouth. I grew up here on Martha's Vineyard, and I live in Boston. So I just wanted to start out by saying that I'm very, very open to the idea that you're presenting here tonight as a lifelong citizen of this Commonwealth, and and someone who really believes in a lot of the ideals of this Commonwealth. I work here at a state university, and I work with communities. I work with the Portuguese American community. I work with a lot of the kind of critical ethnic economies that could be really well highlighted and showcased by this kind of event. So to start off, I want to give you an idea of the positives that I see in this project. At the same time, I live in Boston, To get down to my job here at UMass Dartmouth, I have to drive. There is no feasible way for me to commute by public transportation. We have waited years and years since Governor Weld's administration for some kind of South Coast rail connection for Fall River and for New Bedford. And if that is not part of a plan for 2024, I don't think you're going to see as much support from the South Coast community as you could have if this Commonwealth is going to continue to consider its South Coast disconnected from the rest of the state. If we are disconnected, there's no reason that we should support this plan. Right? Also, I don't know how you got down here tonight. If you took Route 24 and you had your bumpy ride, I commend you for taking that, that trip tonight. We have huge challenges of infrastructure here that would have to be addressed if we were to be working with a sailing event, which I think is really a wonderful opportunity for the South Coast. One would hope that UMass Dartmouth would be able to be part of that as hosting, whether it's hosting athletes, whether it's being part of that infrastructure. But at the same time, this is a facility that, like so many other South Coast facilities, has been neglected to a great extent by the Commonwealth over the years. In terms of 50 years and very little infrastructure being put in here. Aside from housing, this building that we're in right here, was built it was started in 1964, in the same year I was born, and we haven't seen a lot more happening down here. So that we have to think about what are the practical, concrete benefits that are going to make a difference in the lives of South Coast people and people who want to be better connected to Boston, who want to be able to identify with Boston and its ambitions. But there has to be something on the ground that connects us. Otherwise, I don't see the point.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. We appreciate and certainly understand your comments, particularly about South Coast Rail. And I think when Rich comes back, he'll tell you how much time and energy and effort he spent in his former life as Secretary of Transportation working on South Coast Rail. And I think there is a unique opportunity here working with the elected leadership here, the community leaders here, to think about how we can potentially accelerate it, working with the current gubernatorial administration. We need deadlines. And again, having worked in government, and Rich would say this too, sometimes government needs a deadline to get things happen. And that's part of the crux of our argument, or the case that we're trying to make, is that hopefully these games could be that much needed deadline. So thank you very much for your comments. And we certainly agree that if this were to happen here in this region, we hope that UMass Dartmouth and others across the region could work with us as hosts for the training camps that Rich mentioned earlier, or potentially house some of the athletes if they are located here. So thank you very much. Back over here.
This is Dan Cooney. And I think the professor hits it on the head with infrastructure. Anybody who's driving on Massachusetts roads, or anybody in the Northeast, would say that infrastructure is on all of our minds. I would just say, with regard to the connectivity between Boston and New Bedford, if a sailing venue was to be decided to have something on Buzzards Bay, that I worked for the national governing body in 2012 as the commercial director for the U.S. sailing team. I know that our executive director is here tonight. But I went many flights over to London overnight, as most people do, and you will go and you will get there in the morning and you'll be a little bit tired. And I can tell you that we counted the number of roundabouts between London and Weymouth, and it was about 25. And if you could hit less than 3, you were doing a great job, because you were on the opposite side shifting with your right hand and a little bit tired. But 2 hours and 40 minutes from London to Weymouth, which I think makes it a little bit less harrowing than potentially the distance between Boston and New Bedford, although maybe at 6:30 a.m. it might rival it. But infrastructure is certainly on the mind, but it certainly is more connected, New Bedford to Boston, than Weymouth to London, and Weymouth was an outstanding venue. I'll tell you, one of the reasons why it was an outstanding venue was something called the Noth, which was a place, a natural amphitheater for watching the medal races on the, there's 4 or 5 circles, only one of them needs to be very adjacent to a crowd because they will rotate the circles and they will move the different boats to the place where the audience can look and be involved with that. It's incredible when you look at Fort Tabor and how similar that is to the Noth. In fact, I think Fort Tabor compares very favorably to the Noth, which was a really nice venue, and it was an old fort. Therefore, it was probably a little bit older than ours, but still a similar kind of situation. And just to amplify a couple of comments, the thing about Buzzards Bay is, and I think maybe when you live around here, you might take it for granted, but really this is one of the best sailing and racing grounds in the world. NASCAR has Daytona and sailing has Buzzards Bay. It's been talked about the consistency of the breeze. It's not just the strength of the breeze between 12 and 20 knots, but it's also the shifts. The shifts are very important in sailing. It's part of the strategic game of sailing. 5 to 10 to 15 degree shifts are very, you can use those to your advantage. But if they're 40 and 50 and 60 degrees and all over the place, then it's not judged a fair test of skill. And so what you will find here with our thermal sea breezes in the afternoon between 12 and 20 knots is that you'll have 5 to 15 degree shifts. There, you can kind of time them, you can kind of figure it out, but it's a very much a part of the game versus if you're on a lake sometimes and if it goes from here 180 degrees, then you have to call off the race and the race officials have no other choice but to do that. We've talked about the warm water. I don't know many sailors who would prefer cold water to warm water. We certainly have warm water. The bay is the right amount of depth too. That's important because maybe down in Newport, a lovely place to sail, you can have some places where you're setting marks in 100 feet of water, and marks are constantly being reset. And so if you're hauling up in Buzzards Bay, you're hauling up between maybe 18 to 25 feet versus 125 feet. And so the marks can be reset much more quickly, and the race officials can be very nimble and make changes, subtle changes, which are important. Also, I would say that the location of the circles, I know that hasn't been determined yet. It'll be about 4 circles, about 1.5 to 2 mile in diameter, all out in the bay. And the travel time, the commute time, if you will, between where they're based and where they will be sailing and competing is important because it takes time to do that, and you don't want the least amount of wasted effort and time and energy is the thing that you're striving for. And I think you would find that the commute time for the sailors would be compare favorably again to Weymouth, which again was a very good venue. The Buzzard Bay is just simply one of the most beautiful places to sail, and I think we know for TV that's important. That's why the America's Cup is in Bermuda and a number of other commercial decisions they had to make. Thanks very much for all you're doing, and we wish you the best of luck in your endeavor.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
I'm learning a lot about sailing. Now I should actually learn how to sail. Ma'am, over here,
Hi.
please.
Hi, my name is Patricia Leahy. I'm just a resident of Dartmouth. But one of my concerns was I had heard about the beach volleyball venue at the Boston Common, and I'd also heard that in that discussion or plan, there was going to be the destruction of at least 50 100-year-old trees, and the park would be closed to the public for at least a year while this construction stuff was going on. And it's like, that's a public park. You're not going to get too many people voting for beach volleyball if you're going to shut down their only green space in the middle of Boston. And I just don't know how that became your best possible venue when you can go north, east, south, and find a beach with sand. There is Wollaston Beach in Quincy, there's Horseneck Beach here in Westport, there's Gusset Beach in the Cape, there's Revere Beach where they have sand competitions. How did the park become a venue to truck sand into and destroy trees and basically destroy the park? I don't understand that, and I would not vote for this simply for that reason.
Let me try to represent the logic that got us there, and then assure you that we are looking at alternatives. The Boston Common in many ways represents, I think, what the Commonwealth in Boston is all about. It is common space I'm sure you all know the history of the Common and how it came to be and how it came to be called the Common. And our goal was simply recognizing that in many ways it is our most cherished public space. And if you look at the history of the games, even most recent history, in London, beach volleyball was contested at the Royal Horse Guard Parade, which is the Queen's house, and it was contested on the Queen's front lawn. And it was built as a temporary platform, a temporary venue, and was extremely successful. In Tokyo, beach volleyball will be at the Imperial Gardens, one of their, if not their most cherished public space. I'll correct a couple of things that have been out there that aren't quite right. As you probably know, a big chunk of the south end of the Common, there's a parking garage, there's the Common garage. And so the number of, if you look at an aerial map, the number of trees on the, above the Common garage are actually very limited. It's where the softball, baseball fields are. And so if you look at the plan and you look at an aerial photograph, the number of trees that would be affected, even in that most preliminary plan, is actually a much smaller number than 50. And with refinement, even that small number could be reduced even more significantly. And so it wasn't done without a great deal of thought about the history of the place. In fact, it was done because of the history of the place, because it is on the front lawn of the State House, because it is a cherished public space. Now, you're absolutely right. We have received a lot of pushback, a lot of response on volleyball on the Common. And we're looking at alternatives. We're looking at, and you mentioned a number, there are a number more. We will continue to look at alternatives. That is part of the evolution. That is part of the benefit of this whole community engagement process is to learn and to look for those alternatives, but always to make sure that we're making the games accessible to as many people as possible. And to your point about accessibility through transit, but also to welcome the world to Boston, to welcome the world to the Commonwealth. I will add also, little tangentially, we've looked at Buzzards Bay, and we'll continue to look at Buzzards Bay. Everything, I agree with everything that all of you have said about it. It has great potential. I did learn that Robert E. Lee was the designer of the fort. I had no idea that he came this far north. And so those both are both examples of, as we get further and further into this next phase, we are learning both from engagement with some of the national sports federations as well as our community engagement. So just to give you a sense of why it was proposed in the first place and how we're moving forward looking at alternatives.
And Patricia, I would just add that if we do end up landing at the Common or another public space, then we are absolutely committed to leaving that space in a better condition than it was before. So again, that's our commitment and focus on legacy opportunities. But again, as David mentioned, with this iterative process that we're going through, it's clear that there have been some concerns and hence the consideration of other alternatives. Thank you for your question, Patricia. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Joe Nauman. Although I'm the Commodore of the New Bedford Yacht Club, I'm really going to speak more from my hat as the senior executive at the Acushnet Company, the largest employer in the area, and my position as Vice President of the Economic Development Council in New Bedford. Your 10 tenets on which the bid for the games would be based, a number of those apply very well to the city of New Bedford and the greater New Bedford area. I'm sure that the idea is to spread that, that economic development, the jobs creation, the housing, those kinds of things, as far and wide in the Commonwealth as possible as a result of these games. And from my experience in working with this mayor and with the Economic Development Council for a number of years, and as working with a major employer, I'd just like to say that New Bedford, as one of the Commonwealth's gateway cities, is probably the best positioned to take advantage of the benefits that hosting the Olympics in Massachusetts and a venue in the South Coast can present. New Bedford has momentum. New Bedford is, of all the gateway cities, has made the most progress in terms of jobs, in terms of new manufacturers, in terms of deploying new assets that are brought into the city, you know, the new dollars coming into the city. And we think that because we've already set that stage, we are uniquely positioned of all the gateway cities or the other cities outside of Boston and the Commonwealth to really provide the best venue for sailing, but also provide an opportunity to reach the 10 tenets that you're positing that the games are based on, and really be able to put those things to work in an economic setting outside of Boston. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Hi.
My name's Antoinette Lopes. I'm a citizen of New Bedford.
Antoinette, if I could just ask you to step closer to the mic
Okay.
so we can catch you on,
Okay.
and the live stream will catch your sound.
Sure. I've been a fan of the Olympics and of all international sport for a very long time. I was almost shocked to find out that Boston got the bid, the U.S. Bid. And I feel as though I know that we're looking forward to maybe getting sailing down here, but you know, when I was in high school, we had cycling races down here. We have a half marathon every year that we've welcomed the world before. We can help you guys do that. I know that there are some sports within the Olympics that need a lot of venues, and sports like soccer that perhaps, you know, if they need practice places or anything like that, they could come down here. And about our connection to Boston, I brought up today on local talk radio my hope that something like this could connect or get us closer to the South Coast Rail and bringing it here. And the next caller said that if I think that the Olympics would bring the South Coast down here, I must still believe in the Tooth Fairy. We have a belief problem down here, and it's because a lot of things like South Coast Rail are supposed to happen, and then they don't. And I believe in these things, and I think that belief is necessary, and I hope that people can get on board with this, because it's a great opportunity, and it would be a privilege for Boston to be able to welcome the world and show itself off a little bit. And if we can do that down here, I think the people of New Bedford and this local area would really help out. We're an international community ourselves, and I think you should do anything you can to include us. If you believe in us, we'll believe in you back.
Right back at you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Hi.
Hi, Mary Ellen DeFrias. I'm currently the chair of the Buzzards Bay Regatta. We have held the regatta for the past 42 years in Buzzards Bay. We are very well equipped to understand how to run 5 circles, most of which we could set up so that you would have spectacular viewing. As the mayor has mentioned, the fort is a very popular venue, so popular we've moved our larger circle there because the parents want to be able to see their kids sail. And for us to be able to provide them with that access has increased our participation with that fleet, and it's something that we continue to build upon. It's also our fleet that brings us the international sailors, so we're already seeing international sailors come because they want to sail in Buzzards Bay. From a logistics point of view, currently we run around 400 boats and around 1,000 sailors for the weekend, so Olympics with 360 sailors and 270 boats would well fit into what we have. Even understanding they're going to bring coach boats, I can tell you the kids who race 420s, all of them bring coach boats also. So we do understand down here what we're getting into when we say that we truly can host the logistics end of a sailing, on top of everything that was said about the fact that we have a phenomenal venue. And as a race officer, I can tell you it's a great place to run races. I run them probably 10 or 12 weekends a year out there myself, so I know what's out there. But from a logistics point of view, what the mayor has put forth is an excellent venue that we can well handle the traffic that would be coming in.
Great. Thank you, Mary Ellen. And I think your point to the fact that you're already a host to international athletes is something we could use all of your help to convey abroad as well, that whether it's Boston, New Bedford, Fall River, wherever it might be, that we already host all these elite international athletes. So thank you very much for that. Next. Somebody else getting up for a question?
Hello, my name is Rob Bentley-Esky. I'm from the Fall River Mayor's Office. Mayor Sutter, unfortunately, is sick today and couldn't be here himself, so I'm here to represent the office and the
Thank you
city
very
as
much for
best I
being
can.
here.
Yeah, absolutely happy to be here. And I would just like to say that one of the main reasons that I think that Boston is uniquely well-equipped to host the Olympics is because it's surrounded by cities like Fall River and like New Bedford. If properly utilized, from a logistics standpoint, Fall River could really be key in successfully putting on these games. The amount of effort is going to be required in terms of shipping and other logistical issues in order to get all of the heavy materials, heavy machinery in place throughout the area to put together the kinds of stadiums and other things that are going to have to be done. Fall River could be a big help in that. We have one of only 5 deep water ports on our waterfront, one of the other 5 being in New Bedford. And we are capable of bringing in very large boats containing the heavy materials that will be needed. And they can then be, the cargo can be taken off, put directly onto freight rail, and then shipped directly north, eventually getting to Boston. It's a thing that we're capable of doing right now. And with some upgrades, it could be very easily done. And for that reason, I think we could be a key part in this effort. And what are, aside from the logistical sides, in terms of the games themselves, it was mentioned earlier that there is a potential to host rowing events in the city in our South Watuppa Pond, one of the largest bodies of water, not only in Massachusetts, but the entire area of New England around here. Driving from Fall River on my way here, sun was setting. I was looking to my right, and I was looking at South Watuppa, and it's just such a striking, perfect body of water for this kind of event that I actually swerved out of my lane and could have caused an accident, but I didn't, and I'm happy about that. And to explain just why South Watuppa is really the ideal venue for a rowing event, why we think that it would be the perfect location, I would like to have the president of our Fall River Chamber of Commerce, Rob Mellion, who's an experienced rower himself, come up to give you the details on that.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you very much, Rob. Nico, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak this evening, and same thing to Rich. Hopefully we'll see him again. Mayor Mitchell, thank you very much for the introduction earlier about New Bedford and the importance that New Bedford can play in a regional effort to be a participant in a Massachusetts Games that is hubbed out of Boston. This is a great opportunity, and you know that we very much appreciate it. We've had these conversations previously. Having been a former elite athlete, I can appreciate this, and I have to tell you, I personally am very excited about the opportunity that Boston 2024 has created, not just for Boston, but for Massachusetts and New England. Now, of course, I speak about this also on a business perspective, because this is a great, great opportunity for businesses throughout New England, throughout southern New England. Rich Davey, a moment ago, talked about the fact that there have been 3 Olympic Games in recent history, the LA Games, the Atlanta Games, and the Salt Lake Games, all of which netted a profit. I don't think that we can state that enough times, that the recent games where the United States has been involved, where business has been a partner, have netted a profit. And we didn't talk about Lake Placid or other American cities that were participants in the games previously. It's my understanding that there hasn't been a non-profitable Olympic Games in the United States. So I think we need to keep bringing that issue up. There is great excitement in the southeastern region of Massachusetts about being a participant, and you've heard about a couple of the ways that we could potentially be partners in bringing the games to New England. One of them is sailing on Buzzards Bay. Another that you just heard from Rob Bentley-Esky is the potential for logistics. It is going to take a great effort to build an Olympic Games. I know this from personal experience. Some of you associated with Boston 2024 know about my past experience with the 2002 Olympics as one of the coordinators. For Boston, you're going to need, as was just mentioned, cargo. And the fact is, Boston Harbor is saturated right now. And you're going to need logistical hubs. You've got the benefit right here of both New Bedford and Fall River to be those logistical hubs on the commercial side. Because of the upgrades actually that were generated during the tenure of Rich Davey being with the Department of Transportation, we have the ability now to push commercial freight from the southeastern region up to Boston, and we can now do it as of this summer at 35 miles per hour. So we have the logistics. We've got the deep water ports, we have the roll-on, roll-off capability, and we have the ability to put it onto freight and bring it up and help build a Boston Games. We have the ability too of our universities and also some of our private schools as well that can help support the building of the games. Now I want to talk about Fall River. Another means for us to participate is the rowing kayaking venue. And yes, you've already heard from me on this issue privately, but here's the public pitch. It was mentioned earlier this evening about Lowell and the Merrimack River being the potential site for the rowing venue, kayaking venue. I know from personal experience, it's not going to work. Rowing is governed by FISA. FISA is the World Rowing Association that sets the rules for all international rowing events and for the World Championships and for the Olympic Games. I actually have a copy of the rules right here. Nico, I gave you a copy a couple of weeks ago. It states clear and unambiguously in the rules for FISA that FISA is the body that sets and selects and sanctions rowing courses. There are a number of prerequisite requirements for a sanctionable course for rowing. There has to be 8 lanes. You need to have a width of the course of at least a minimum of 135 meters. Ideally, you should have 165 meters. The real important issue is that the course must be fair. Fairness under FISA regulations maintains there can be no stream. And what they mean by stream is no current. Merrimack River has a little problem with that one. There's current. I've raced the Merrimack River. I know personally There's a little thing amongst us in the rowing community who have raced on the Merrimack. You don't want to be on the outside lanes because there's a little bit of advantage to be in the center. You go faster. That's going to be a problem because that's going to make this a non-sanctionable course. Another problem that the Merrimack has is that the banks don't absorb waves. So when the motorboat launches go by, those waves are going to be bouncing off and creating a ricochet effect. Again, that's a non-starter for FISA. That's the reason why, to my knowledge, I'm trying to think back, I don't recall an Olympics that was on a river. I'm reaching back and I'm trying to go back in my memory. I don't recall one. It's always been on a lake because they create fair courses. Lake Casitas was LA. Lanier was in Georgia for the Atlantic Games. We have a lake or a reservoir that can host these games that is an hour from Boston, less than an hour from Boston with no traffic. It is a lake or a reservoir that is sheltered, has easy access from the highway. And another issue that comes up with the FISA regulations is that you have to have a parallel course or should have a parallel course for warm-ups. We can do that on the South Watuppa with no problem. The Davis Beach area on the South Watuppa is absolutely perfect as the launch site for the rowing and kayaking venues. And the other great thing about the South Watuppa is that it's formulated in a way that you can definitely build your stands, you can definitely build all of the infrastructure necessary for a rowing venue, and it'll be a fair course. And the other issue that I didn't bring up earlier is the issue of depth. You have to have a 3.5 meter depth across so that, again, you have an issue of fairness. You don't have that issue on the Merrimack. So I say to you, please seriously consider the South Watuppa as your site for rowing and kayaking, because we have exactly what you need to be able to produce that venue as part of a Boston Olympics.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Rob. We clearly have plenty of expertise in the technical aspects of both rowing and sailing in this room, and I've learned a lot just listening to all of you, and I'm sure David has too. David, I don't know if you want to mention anything briefly about
I can tell you that in the summertime, June, July, and August, I drive past South Watuppa Pond every weekend because I come down here every weekend. And it is a beautiful spot, and you should know, you probably do know, that we are working with Doug Arnott, who you probably know, and Doug brings a wealth of expertise on all of these venues, and we are looking hard at South Watuppa Pond.
Thank you again, Rob. Sir?
Hi, I'm Ed Lobo. I'm the Commodore of the Low Tide Yacht Club. As the mayor mentioned, we're right on Fort Tabor, right in the center of the attraction, Fort Tabor. In addition, I've been sailing competitively around this area for 40 years. I was born and bred in New Bedford, in the New Bedford area, and I've been competitively sailing here. And just to repeat what was said, it's a perfect place. It's ideal. New Bedford is a natural setting. When you count Buzzards Bay and the outer harbor and Fort Tabor, it's a natural setting for sailing venue. When we polled the club in the last few meetings, everybody was interested in supporting this. So we not only have the venue and the opportunity to support this, but the willingness, I think it's very strong here. I don't want to go and repeat everything that was said, but I think everybody here is happy for this opportunity, and I think you'd be pleased if you chose New Bedford.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Next question.
Hi, Mike Jackman,
Hi, Mike.
District Director for Congressman Bill Keating. Congressman's in D.C., couldn't be here today, but I just wanted, on his behalf, to thank you for coming down to the South Coast to give folks here the opportunity to voice their comments, their opinions, advocacy, as the mayor and other folks have done so eloquently, as well as Fall River Mayor's office, that we do have a lot to offer, a lot of resources down here that can be useful and can be part of the Olympic movement here in Boston. You know, the Olympics obviously present a great opportunity, but as most in civic life, as most opportunities for great reward, there's great risk too. I'm pleased to see, Mr. Davey, from the presentation that a lot of that risk has been accounted for by the committee. Of course, you mentioned the security aspect of it, and that is a huge responsibility for Congress to address, and I know you've had conversations with Congressman Keating as he's on the Homeland Security Committee, and will be playing a big role in making sure that happens. So I just wanted to really just say thank you, and thank all the folks for coming out today, for being here tonight, and giving the folks here a chance to be heard. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and folks should know we've had great conversations with the congressman, and he's been extremely supportive already. We really appreciate that and look forward to continuing to work with him.
Thanks, Mike. Sir, next up.
Time for a new sport. Hi, my name is Dave Pixoto. I'm the New England Region Volleyball Association Commissioner. I want to thank you guys. You showed up at the BCEC at an event I had a couple of weeks ago, 400 teams. Very well received.
Thank you for having us.
It was a pleasure. We're looking forward to the event. We know the BCEC is expanding. We know that the area is going to grow with hotels. We're very excited about that. This is our second year with the event. We went 30% up in numbers this year. We're looking at, we actually were awarded a national qualifier bid for next year, which is going to grow our event even more so. We had Canada come down this year. So people are excited about Boston, and 2024 is adding to that. We have dealt with the beach volleyball side of it. The AVP was down in Marina Bay, down in 2007. Great venue, had a great weekend, sold out the weekend for the whole place. I don't know if Marina Bay, I guess it was built up after that, so that's another option for you. We have heard from sitting volleyball, Paralympic side of the game. The manager of those teams is a friend of mine. He would love to come to Boston. I just had an email about potentially Pan Am games in August in Boston and coming down, and people are interested now that this is happening. They're interested in doing other events leading up to the Olympics. So this is not just about 2024. This is about a lot of things that are going to happen leading up to that, and excitement. The issue we have as a volunteer organization, we work full-time, and a lot of these sports that you're going to run into that have associations in New England have volunteer staff. We need a sports commission. We need someone that we can turn to when I get a call from USA Volleyball and says, hey, we want to run a Pan Am Games qualifier in Boston, and we want to run an FIVB World League in Boston. Who do I turn to that can help us establish this event? Housing, transportation, food. We'll PR it. We have 10,000 members in our league. We'll get people there. We'll sell out the venues. But we have a difficult time establishing these events. So we're looking for either a sports commission or something that maybe you can help us with that'll get these events off the ground and lead us to 2024.
So we can get you the information. The city of Boston does have a director of a number of things, including bringing sporting events to Boston. I believe the state has a office. Shannon McCardle, who runs an office under the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism. There's a particular sport director. So we can get you that information. Our two contacts that just come to mind immediately to help facilitate the kind of tournament you're talking about.
Yeah, I know EOSOC has reached out to me this weekend. Rachel Isaacs is putting together something, so we're going to work with her. So maybe this information getting back to Rachel will facilitate it for a lot of other sports as well.
So Rachel's actually in our office now, working very closely with us. So
all right.
She's about 8 feet away from where I sit.
There you go.
So that's good that she's reaching out as well. She's going to be our conduit. The USOC's provided her as a resource to us, and we're very thankful for that, to reach out to sports federations, other folks around Massachusetts and around the United States. In part, we hope that sports federations are our ambassadors to talk about what can happen in Massachusetts and what a great place this is to compete, to visit, and to be part of. And so we definitely want to get you involved.
Yeah, absolutely. We had Doug Beal is CEO of USA Volleyball, former Olympic coach, and Tom Pingle, manager director of events for USA Volleyball, have both been at the BCEC, and they were amazed at what we have here. They spent a little bit of time in Boston. They absolutely loved it, and both have stated it would be a great place for an Olympics. So I think we're on the right path. I think we need a lot more partnerships to develop. Certainly our sport is willing to work with you as well as others. So we just need to keep those lines open and going forward with these events. So thank you
Happy
for
to
coming
do
down
so.
to our little neighborhood down here.
Thank you very much. Other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Yes, my name's Wallace Kopchansky. You mentioned earlier that you're in favor of a ballot initiative. As of 6:30 this evening, former gubernatorial candidate Mr. Falchuk has not heard from anybody from Boston 2024. Is your support just in general? Will you be giving support to Mr. Falchuk, or are you planning to do a parallel initiative?
So, true, we have not talked to Mr. Falchuk today. We talked to him a few weeks ago. He attended one of our events. We're open to working with him. I think he's, as I saw on the record a little while ago, saying, doesn't matter what we do, he's going to do his own thing. He's entitled to do that. But we feel strongly that the voters of Massachusetts should have an ability to weigh in, and if we can work with Evan or other civic leaders who have supported a ballot referendum, we want to do that. We want to work with the Attorney General and the Secretary of State and others to make sure that the lawyers all agree that what we craft can actually make the ballot. There's a whole host of steps and archaic steps that need to occur. It has to be drafted correctly or else it can't go on the ballot. So we have a lot of work to do in terms of the wording and the process. And again, we're open to working with Evan, but he's also indicated he might just go it alone anyways, which he's entitled to do.
All right, thank you very much.
Sure, welcome.
Thank you, Wallace. Any other questions or comments from folks in the audience? Well, again, we've heard and learned a lot from all of you. Thank you very much. I just want to, oh, good, sir.
John Kisser from Taunton, and just for the record, I do support Boston 2024. As far as the ballot question, if it passes statewide, but the Boston precincts, I guess my question is, what then, what now?
So,
and then
Please.
two is, why not a host city type agreement like with the casinos?
So on the first question, we've been clear that if a statewide ballot passes, but the city of Boston in that ballot votes it down, we will not move forward. Mayor Walsh, the mayor of the city of Boston, is the ultimate signatory to our bid. He is the person who would ultimately be responsible, even if we had venues in Fall River or New Bedford or Lowell. The buck stops with him. So we've been clear, if the citizens of Boston don't support it, we won't move forward. On the question of host city contracts with the casinos, explain that to me a little more. I'm not sure where you were going
Well, I
with that.
guess just my question, I don't know enough about this, but,
Yeah.
you know, the casino bid was put on a statewide ballot, it was approved, but then there's host city agreements.
I see.
So has that been explored? Is that possible?
So, no, and I'm not sure it's entirely possible because the legislation that was set up, as I understand it, for the casinos was very specific about what, excuse me, what they had to go through. There's obviously no law on the books about the Olympics, and so there's no real process that we would follow legally, I guess is what I'm saying. So, there was a process in place for the casinos. I think what we're doing is using the ballot initiative like any other potential public policy that could impact Massachusetts but we have to have a question specifically tailored that it can get on the ballot. You just can't ask, Massachusetts citizens, how you feel about this particular issue. There has to be, I think, a tangible legal reason in order to get on the ballot. So now I'm speaking outside of my league. I've never done a ballot initiative before, but we know that there are certain requirements in order for a ballot question to be deemed appropriate by the Attorney General in particular.
And then just my last question, and then maybe clarify, why not just a citywide referendum for the city of Boston and not a statewide ballot?
Well, it's a good question. It's actually non-binding in the city. It's been considered. It has to be filed with the city council. There's actually a city councilor did file a question. It could happen this fall as well. But we felt as though that while Boston is the lead city, if you will, is the leader, would ultimately sign the agreement. We're here tonight. We're up in Lowell. We've been in Worcester and Springfield. And in many respects, while Boston is the host city, this is going to affect, we believe positively, but affect the entire state. And that's our vision, is to make sure that we think all citizens should weigh in, because we believe that this is going to benefit every corner of Massachusetts.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, I'll just ask Rich just to close out with a brief comment on timeline and process from here. We've talked about our statewide community meetings that we're going to continue to do over the next several weeks, but just timeline and next steps.
Yeah, well, first, I apologize for having to step away. I was on a brief call, but thank you. I know Nico and David took your comments, and as I said, I've been able to speak to some folks from both Fall River and New Bedford about their ideas, so we appreciate folks coming tonight to express their opinions, their thoughts, their concerns, and their ideas. As Nico said, process, it's a few things. Our letter, the United States Olympic Committee's letter to the International Olympic Committee, officially designating Boston, is due in September. That's when we know who our competition will be. We already know that Hamburg and Rome are candidate cities, or cities that wish to be candidates, I should say. Paris, Istanbul, others will likely get in the mix over the next 6 months, so we'll know who our competition is come September. Our first bid to the IOC is due in January of 2016. We will be back out publicly sometime, probably late spring, early summer, with our bid 2.0. So the bid that we already submitted to the USOC, we will revise that and come back out publicly, taking all your comments and other cities and towns and neighborhoods' comments as well. Venues will change. We'll probably make some improvements to some of our venues and be back out for public comment. From there, the United States Olympic Committee will likely narrow the list of cities from the bids that are submitted in a year from now. And then those cities will have yet another opportunity to refine their bid, become more technical in our specification, nail down, harden our venues, if you will. And a second bid will be due in early 2017 for a final decision to be made by the IOC in August or September of 2017. So about 30 months from now. So a long time to continue to refine and hone our bid and to get it going. But in the meantime, we're pleased that you're here tonight. And in the meantime, we're going to make our case to the citizens of Massachusetts over the next 18 months on why we believe, and I was just reflecting that, the choice to bid was bold. I think the selection of Boston and Massachusetts was bold. And we think we can bring a unique boldness to the games themselves. And that's why we're in this, folks. And that's why we hope you are with us to bring these games to Massachusetts. So thank you very much for participating. Thank you at home for watching. And we wish you a good night.
Thank you. Have a great night.